The rain had stopped 20 minutes ago, but Brookdale Park still looked like a battlefield. Puddles the size of dinner tables stretched across the walking paths. Mud, thick and dark and relentless, clung to everything it touched. The oak trees dripped steadily, their leaves heavy and bowed. The air smelled like wet earth and rotting leaves, a scent that hung thick and oppressive in the gray afternoon light. Leah Anderson sat frozen in her wheelchair at the edge of the main pathway, staring down at the mud trap that had swallowed her front wheels. She was 10 years old, small for her age, with dark hair plastered to her forehead from the earlier rain. Her hands gripped the wheel rim so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The skin stretched thin over bone. "Come on," she whispered to herself. "Please." She pushed. The wheels didn't budge. The mud was thick, almost alive in its consistency. It had pulled her in the moment she tried to navigate around a puddle, and now it held her like quicksand, like hands reaching up from the earth itself. The more she struggled, the deeper the wheels sank. Her arms trembled with the effort. She pushed again, harder this time, her shoulders straining. Nothing. The wheelchair remained trapped, immobile. Her breath came faster now. Panic crept up her spine like ice water, cold and paralyzing. She twisted in her seat, looking back toward the bench where she'd last seen Miss Cooper, the nanny her father had hired to take care of her. There she was, 30 meters away, leaning against the armrest of a covered pavilion bench, phone pressed to her ear, perfectly dry under the shelter's roof. "Miss Cooper!" Leah called out, her voice thin and desperate. The woman didn't even look up. "Miss Cooper, please, I need help." This time Miss Cooper glanced over. Her eyes landed on Leah for half a second, just long enough to register the situation. Then she turned her back and kept talking into the phone, her voice carrying across the empty space between them. Leah's heart dropped into her stomach. She could hear Miss Cooper's voice drifting over, casual and unbothered. "I don't know, Janet. She's fine. She always makes everything so dramatic." Leah's hands went numb. "The kid needs to learn some independence, you know?" Miss Cooper continued, letting out a short laugh. "Can't have someone running after her every 5 minutes. She's got to figure things out on her own." The words hit Leah like a physical slap. She stared at the woman's back, willing her to turn around to see her, to care. But Miss Cooper just shifted her weight and kept talking, her voice light and dismissive. "Honestly, sometimes I think she does it on purpose, for attention." Leah's throat burned. She turned away, blinking hard against the tears that threatened to spill over. Fine. She would find help somewhere else. She had to. A woman in a pink jogging suit was coming down the path, earbuds in, moving at a steady pace. Her ponytail swung with each step. "Excuse me," Leah called out, her voice cracking. "I need help." The jogger glanced over. Their eyes met for just a moment. Then the woman looked away and kept running, her pace never faltering. Leah's chest tightened. "Please," she tried again, louder this time. The woman didn't stop, didn't even slow down. She just kept moving, her ponytail swinging behind her as she disappeared around the bend in the path. Leah's hands shook. She looked down at the mud again, at the wheels buried halfway to the axle. The world felt like it was closing in around her. A man in a business suit appeared next, phone pressed to his ear, briefcase swinging in his other hand. He was walking fast, clearly in a hurry, his face set in concentration. "Sir," Leah called out. "Sir, please, I'm stuck." He saw her. She knew he did. His eyes flicked toward her for half a second, registering her presence. Then he turned his head and walked faster, his voice rising as he spoke into the phone. "Yeah, I'm almost there. Traffic was a nightmare." He passed her without another glance. Leah felt something crack inside her chest, something fragile and important. A young couple approached next, laughing about something. The girl's arm looped through her boyfriend's. Her face was bright and carefree, flushed with happiness. "Help!" Leah's voice was desperate now, ragged at the edges. "Please, I need help." The girl noticed her first. Her smile faltered. She nudged her boyfriend and nodded toward the wheelchair. They both looked, their conversation dying mid-sentence. The boyfriend glanced at Leah, then at the mud, then back at his girlfriend. He pulled out his phone, pretended to check a message, and steered them both in the opposite direction. "We're going to be late," he muttered. They walked away, their laughter resuming a few moments later, lighter now, relieved. Leia's vision blurred. She tried to push the wheels again, her arms screaming in protest. They didn't move. The mud held her fast, like hands pulling her down into the earth. The wind picked up, cold and sharp. A gust hit her face, and with it came a spray of mud from the ground. It splattered across her cheek, her neck, her hands. She flinched, squeezing her eyes shut against the sting. When she opened them again, the world felt smaller, darker, emptier. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible now. "Anyone?" The park was full of people, dog walkers, joggers, families with strollers, and yet she was completely alone. Her breathing quickened, her chest felt tight. The sounds around her faded into a dull hum, just her heartbeat pounding in her ears and the ragged pull of air in and out of her lungs. She looked down at the mud swallowing her wheels. It felt like the world itself was pulling her under, and no one cared enough to reach down and pull her back up. Behind her, Miss Cooper laughed at something on the phone. Leia's hands went limp in her lap, and then movement. In the distance, at the far edge of the park, a figure appeared. A boy, teenage, tall and lean, wearing a dark green work uniform with a name tag she couldn't read from this far away. He was walking fast, head down, a plastic grocery bag swinging from one hand. Malik Johnson was exhausted. His shift at Rivermart had run 2 hours overtime because someone called in sick and the manager begged him to stay. He'd said yes. He always said yes, because his grandmother needed the money for her medications and the rent was due in 3 days. He was 15 years old, but he felt 30. His feet ached in his worn-out sneakers. His green work uniform was damp with sweat and smelled faintly of disinfectant and old produce. The plastic grocery bag in his hand, containing 2 cans of soup and a loaf of bread, felt heavier than it should. All he wanted was to get home, take off his shoes, and sit down for 5 minutes. But then he saw her. At first, it was just a shape in the distance, a small figure near the pathway. Something about the way she sat, perfectly still, shoulders hunched, made him slow his pace. He squinted through the gray light. A wheelchair, stuck in the mud, and a little girl alone. Her hands were gripping the wheels like she was holding on for dear life. Malik stopped walking. His brain registered everything in an instant. The mud swallowing the wheels, the way her body trembled, the people passing by without stopping, without even slowing down. His chest tightened. He looked down at the bag in his hand, then at his phone in his pocket, then at his shoes, the only pair he owned that weren't falling apart. Everything was going to get soaked, ruined. He looked back at the girl. She was crying now. He could see it even from here, the way her shoulders shook. Malik dropped the bag, and he ran. His sneakers hit the wet pavement hard, water splashing up with every step. The cold air burned his lungs, but he didn't slow down. He cut across the grass, through puddles, past a dog walker who yelled something he didn't hear. The girl looked up as he approached, her eyes wide and red-rimmed, filled with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. "Hey," Malik said, breathing hard. "Hey, it's okay, I'm here." She stared at him like she didn't believe he was real. He dropped to his knees in front of the wheelchair, ignoring the mud that immediately soaked through his uniform pants, cold and thick. Up close, he could see how deep the wheels were buried. The mud was thick, almost clay-like, and it had formed a suction around the rubber. "Okay," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "Okay, let's get you out of here." He grabbed the frame of the wheelchair and pulled. It didn't move. He adjusted his grip, planting his feet more firmly, and pulled harder. The wheelchair shifted slightly, but the mud held tight. "Come on," he whispered. He tried a different angle, pushing down on the handles to lift the front wheels. The mud made a sucking sound, reluctant to release its grip. He pushed harder, his arms straining. The front wheels lifted an inch, 2 inches, then slipped back down. "It's not working," Leia said, her voice small and broken. "It will," Malik said firmly. "Just give me a second." He circled around to the side, analyzing the situation. The wheels were buried too deep to lift straight out. He needed leverage. He needed to break the suction. He knelt down beside the right wheel and started digging with his bare hands, scooping mud away from the tire. It was cold and thick, clinging to his fingers. He dug faster, creating a channel around the wheel, breaking the seal. "What's your name?" Ibertwenty asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Leia," she whispered. "I'm Malik." "Nice to meet you, Leia. We're going to get you out of here, I promise." He moved to the other wheel and repeated the process, digging furiously. His hands were covered in mud now, his uniform soaked and filthy. He didn't care. After a few minutes, he'd created enough space around both wheels. He stood up, wiped his hands on his pants, and grabbed the wheelchair frame again. "Okay, Leia, when I lift, I need you to hold on tight. Can you do that?" She nodded, gripping the armrests. Malik took a deep breath, bent his knees, and lifted with everything he had. The wheelchair resisted for a moment, then suddenly broke free with a wet, sucking sound. He pulled it backward, onto solid ground, away from the mud trap. Leia let out a sob of relief. "You're okay," Malik said, breathing hard. "You're out." But they weren't done yet. Leia was still covered in mud, shaking from cold and fear, and Malik could see in her eyes that she was seconds away from completely falling apart. "Hey," he said gently, kneeling in front of her so they were eye level. "You're safe now. I've got you." She looked at him, tears streaming down her face, and nodded. Malik glanced around. There was a stone bench about 20 meters away under a covered area, dry and sheltered. But the wheelchair wheels were caked with mud. They'd never make it that far. He made a decision. "I'm going to carry you, okay? Just to that bench over there." "Is that all right?" Leia hesitated, then nodded again. Malik slid one arm under her knees and the other around her back, lifting her carefully. She was lighter than he expected, small and fragile in his arms. He carried her to the bench and set her down gently, making sure she was stable. "Stay here for a second," is what he said. "I'm going to get your chair." He jogged back, grabbed the wheelchair, and wheeled it over to the bench. The wheels left muddy tracks on the pavement. He positioned it next to the bench and helped Leia back into it. "There," he said. "Better?" She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do. No one else stopped. They all just—" Her voice broke. "They all just walked away." Malik felt a surge of anger on her behalf, but he kept his voice gentle. "Well, I stopped. And you're safe now. That's what matters." Leia looked up at him, really looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. Gratitude, yes, but also something deeper. Recognition, like she'd found something she didn't know she was looking for. "Are you okay?" Malik asked. "Are you hurt?" "No, just scared." "That's fair. I'd be scared too." They sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the park gradually filtering back in. Birds, distant voices, the drip of water from the trees. "Where's your mom or dad?" Malik asked. "My mom died when I was little. My dad is at work. Miss Cooper is supposed to be watching me, but—" She gestured vaguely toward the pavilion where Miss Cooper was still on the phone, oblivious. Malik's jaw tightened. "That's not okay." "I know." He pulled out his phone, checked the time. He was already late. His grandmother would be worried, but he couldn't just leave Leia here. "Do you have your dad's number?" he asked. "Yeah, in my bag." Leia reached into a small backpack attached to her wheelchair and pulled out a phone. Her hands were still shaking. "Can I?" Malik asked, holding out his hand. She handed him the phone. He found the contact labeled Dad and pressed call. It rang 3 times, then a man's voice answered, low and controlled. "Leia?" No, sir. My name is Malik. I'm here at Brookdale Park with your daughter." "She's okay, but there was an incident. She got stuck in the mud and—" "Where is Miss Cooper?" The voice was colder now, edged with something dangerous. "She's here, but she wasn't paying attention." There was a long pause. When the man spoke again, his voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made Malik's skin prickle. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Don't leave her side." "I won't, sir." The line went dead. Malik handed the phone back to Leia. "Your dad's on his way." "He's going to be so mad at Miss Cooper," Leia said softly. "Yeah, I think he might be." They waited. Malik sat down on the bench beside the wheelchair, his muddy uniform soaking into the wood. He didn't care. Leia seemed calmer now, the panic gradually draining out of her. "You work at Rivermart?" she asked, nodding at his name tag. "Yeah, just part-time after school." Do you like it? Malik shrugged. Shrugged. It's okay. It pays the bills. You seem young to be worried about bills. I live with my grandmother. She's sick. Someone's got to help out. Leia looked at him with a new kind of respect. That's really good of you. It's just what you do, you know? For family. 8 minutes later, a car pulled into the parking lot. Not just any car. A black Maserati Quattroporte, sleek and powerful, its engine purring like a predator. It moved through the lot with an almost deliberate slowness, commanding attention without demanding it. It stopped near the pathway, and two men got out first. Both wore dark suits. Both carried themselves with a stillness that spoke of controlled violence. They scanned the area, their eyes moving methodically, cataloging threats. One of them, broad-shouldered with a scar above his left eyebrow, spoke quietly into a phone. Then the back door opened. Marco Santoro stepped out. He was 42 years old, tall and solidly built, with dark hair touched with gray at the temples. He wore a charcoal gray suit perfectly tailored, with a black shirt underneath, no tie. A gold signet ring gleamed on his right hand. His face was handsome in a weathered way, lined with experience, but it was his eyes that drew attention. Dark, steady, and completely unreadable. He moved with purpose, his steps measured and deliberate. People instinctively moved out of his way without realizing they were doing it. The two men flanked him at a respectful distance, one on each side. Malik stood up as they approached, suddenly very aware of how he must look, covered in mud, his uniform soaked and filthy. Marco's eyes found Leia first. They softened, just for a moment, a flash of something human beneath the control. Then they moved to Malik, and the softness disappeared, replaced by cold assessment. Leia, Marco said, his voice low and even. Are you hurt? No, Papa, I'm okay. Marco's gaze shifted to Miss Cooper, who had finally noticed his arrival and was hurrying over, phone clutched in her hand, her face pale. Mr. Santoro, Not now. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the air like a blade. Miss Cooper stopped mid-sentence, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Marco turned back to Malik. You're the one who called? Yes, sir. What happened? Malik explained quickly, keeping his voice steady. He described finding Leia stuck in the mud, the people who had walked past, the way he'd pulled her out. He didn't mention Miss Cooper's negligence. He didn't have to. Marco's expression said he already knew. When Malik finished, Marco was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes studying him. It was an uncomfortable silence, the kind that made you want to fill it with words, but Malik held his tongue. You pulled her out yourself? Marco asked finally. Yes, sir. Why? The question caught Malik off guard. Because she needed help. And the others, the ones who walked past? I don't know why they didn't stop, sir, but I couldn't just keep walking. Marco's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, a flicker of respect or perhaps recognition. What's your name? Malik Johnson, sir. How old are you, Malik? 15. Marco glanced at Malik's uniform, at his muddy clothes, at the grocery bag still lying where Malik had dropped it near the mud trap. He took in everything in a single sweep, reading a story Malik hadn't spoken aloud. You were on your way home from work. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir. And you stopped. Yes, sir. Marco reached into his jacket and pulled out a wallet. He extracted several bills and held them out. For your trouble, and for the uniform. Malik stared at the money. It was more than he made in a week. But something about the way it was offered, like payment for a service, made him uncomfortable. I don't need payment, sir. I was just helping. Marco's eyebrows rose slightly, the first real expression Malik had seen on his face. You sure about that? Yes, sir. For a moment, Marco just looked at him. Then he slipped the money back into his wallet and nodded slowly. All right. He turned to his daughter. Leia, is this how it happened? The way he says? Yes, Papa. He saved me. No one else would stop. They all just walked by. But Malik ran to help me. He got all muddy and ruined his shoes and carried me to the bench. He was so kind. Marco's jaw tightened. He looked back at Malik with a new intensity, as if seeing him properly for the first time. You carried her. Yes, sir. The wheelchair was stuck. I couldn't leave her in the mud. Marco was silent again. Then he did something unexpected. He extended his hand. Marco Santoro, the girl's father. Malik shook it. Marco's grip was firm, controlled, and when he released Malik's hand, he held his gaze for a moment longer. You did a good thing today, Malik. Anyone would have. No. Marco's voice was quiet but absolute. Not anyone. Most people wouldn't. You did. He turned to one of the men beside him, the one with the scar. Enzo, get the chair into the car. Enzo moved forward smoothly, lifting the wheelchair with practiced ease and carrying it toward the Maserati. The other man, younger with sharp features, opened the back door. Marco lifted Leia gently, cradling her with a tenderness that seemed at odds with his controlled exterior. He carried her to the car and settled her into the back seat, speaking to her softly in Italian. Words Malik couldn't understand but could feel the meaning of. Comfort, reassurance, safety. When Leia was settled, Marco straightened and walked back to where Malik stood. Where do you live? He asked. Riverside. The apartment's on 4th Street. Marco nodded slowly. I know it. Of course he did. Everyone in the city knew Riverside. It was the neighborhood you avoided after dark, the place where the buildings were falling apart and the police didn't patrol unless they had to. You walked here? Yes, sir. I was on my way home from work. Marco glanced at the grocery bag, still lying in the mud. One of the cans had rolled out. Your groceries. It's okay, I can. Marco held up a hand. Sal. The younger man moved immediately, jogging over to retrieve the bag. He picked it up, examined the contents, then walked toward the Maserati. He opened the trunk, placed the bag inside, then closed it with a soft click. We'll give you a ride, Marco said. It wasn't an offer, it was a statement. I don't want to be any trouble, sir. You're not. Get in. Malik hesitated. Everything about this felt surreal. The car, the men in suits, the quiet authority in Marco's voice. But he was exhausted, covered in mud, and it was a long walk home. Okay, thank you, Marco gestured toward the car. Front seat. Malik walked over, acutely aware of how filthy he was. Sal opened the front passenger door and stepped aside. Malik slid in carefully, trying not to get mud on the pristine leather interior. It smelled like expensive cologne and new leather. Marco got in beside Leia in the back. Enzo took the driver's seat, and Sal got in on the passenger side of the back row. The engine started with a low rumble. As they pulled out of the parking lot, Malik glanced back at Miss Cooper, who stood frozen on the pathway, her phone hanging limply from her hand, her face ashen. She looked like someone who had just realized they'd made a terrible mistake. The ride to Riverside was quiet. Marco spoke softly to Leia in the back, asking her questions, making sure she was okay. Leia answered in a small voice, still shaken but calmer now. Malik stared out the window, watching the city slide past. The neighborhoods changed as they drove, from the clean, tree-lined streets around the park to the grittier, more worn-down blocks of Riverside. The buildings got older, the paint more faded, the streets more crowded. When they pulled up in front of Malik's building, a 4-story brick structure with rusted fire escapes and boarded-up windows on the ground floor, Marco leaned forward slightly. This is it? He asked. Yes, sir. 3rd floor, apartment 3B. Enzo put the car in park but left the engine running. Sal got out and retrieved the grocery bag from the trunk, handing it to Malik through the window. Thank you, Malik said. He opened the door and started to get out, then paused. And thank you for the ride, Mr. Santoro. Marco regarded him for a moment, those dark eyes unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice low and deliberate. What you did today, it matters. Don't forget that. Malik nodded, not sure what to say. Marco pulled a business card from his jacket pocket and held it out. If you ever need anything, you call that number. Malik took the card. It was simple, expensive paper, embossed lettering, just a name and a phone number. No title, no company. Thank you, sir. Marco nodded once. Take care of yourself, Malik. The Maserati pulled away smoothly, disappearing down the street. Malik stood on the sidewalk, holding the grocery bag and the business card, watching until the car turned the corner and vanished from sight. He looked down at the card, running his thumb over the raised lettering. Then he put it in his pocket and went inside. Ruth Johnson was sitting in her worn armchair by the window when Malik walked in. She was 68 years old, small and thin, with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her hands, resting on the armrests, were swollen at the knuckles, the joints twisted from arthritis. A half-empty glass of water sat on the side table next to a bottle of pills. She looked up when the door opened, her face creasing with worry. "Baby, where have you been? I was getting worried. You're usually home by She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening as she took in his appearance. "Lord have mercy. What happened to you?" Malik set the grocery bag down and kicked off his muddy shoes by the door. "I'm fine, Grandma. Just had to help someone." Ruth pushed herself up from the chair with effort, her movements slow and painful. She walked over to him, reaching up to touch his face with her swollen fingers. "You're soaked through and filthy. What happened?" Malik explained as he peeled off his uniform shirt, trying not to drip mud on the already stained carpet. He told her about Leia, about the mud, about pulling her out. He didn't mention the money Marco had offered or the strange intensity in the man's eyes. Ruth listened, her expression shifting from worry to pride. When he finished, she cupped his face in both hands and looked at him with fierce love. "That's my boy. That's my Malik. You did good, baby. Real good." "It wasn't a big deal, Grandma." "Yes, it was." Her voice was firm. "Helping someone who needs it is always a big deal, especially when nobody else will." She released his face and patted his cheek gently. "Now go get cleaned up before you track mud all through the apartment, and put those clothes in the sink to soak." Malik nodded and headed toward the bathroom, but he paused in the doorway. "Grandma?" "Yes, baby?" The girl's father, he was different, intense, like— Malik struggled to find the words. "Like someone important." Ruth's expression shifted slightly, becoming more guarded. "Did he give you his name?" "Marco Santoro." Ruth went very still. The color drained from her face. "Grandma, you okay?" She recovered quickly, but Malik saw the fear that flickered in her eyes before she hid it. "I'm fine. Just be careful with that family, Malik. People like that, they're not like us." "What do you mean?" Ruth shook her head. "Nothing. Just be careful, that's all I'm saying." She turned away, busying herself with putting the groceries away, but her hands shook slightly as she worked. Malik frowned but didn't push. He went to the bathroom and turned on the shower, letting the water heat up while he stripped off the rest of his muddy clothes. As he stepped under the spray, watching brown water swirl down the drain, he thought about Marco's face, about the way people had moved out of his path without realizing it, about the quiet authority in his voice, about the business card sitting in his pants pocket. That night, Malik lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The apartment was quiet except for the sounds of the building settling and the occasional siren from the street below. Through the thin walls, he could hear the muffled argument of the couple next door, their voices rising and falling in familiar patterns. He thought about Laya's face when he'd first seen her, terrified and alone. He thought about the people who had walked past her without stopping. He thought about how easily he could have been one of them, how close he'd come to just keeping his head down and going home. But he hadn't. And now there was a business card in his wallet with a name and a number, and a strange feeling in his chest that something had shifted, that today had been a turning point he didn't fully understand yet. He rolled over and closed his eyes, but sleep was a long time coming. The next morning was Saturday. Malik didn't have work, which meant he could sleep in, but old habits died hard. He woke up at 6, the pale gray light of dawn filtering through the thin curtains. He lay there for a moment, listening to his grandmother moving around in the kitchen, the familiar sounds of breakfast being prepared. He got up, pulled on clean clothes, and went to help her. Ruth was at the stove, scrambling eggs in a dented pan. She looked tired, the lines around her eyes deeper than usual. She'd been up half the night coughing, though she'd tried to muffle the sound so he wouldn't hear. "Morning, Grandma." "Morning, baby. You sleep okay?" "Yeah, you?" Like a rock. The lie came easily to her lips, practiced and smooth. They ate breakfast together at the small table by the window, not talking much. It was comfortable silence, the kind built from years of shared mornings and mutual understanding. Malik helped wash the dishes afterward, then settled on the couch with a library book for his English class, while Ruth watched her morning shows. Around 10 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. It was a firm knock, authoritative, not the hesitant tap of a neighbor or the aggressive pounding of someone looking for trouble. Just three solid knocks that somehow conveyed both patience and expectation. Malik and Ruth exchanged glances. They weren't expecting anyone. Malik got up and looked through the peephole. His heart jumped. Marco Santoro stood in the hallway wearing a black suit today with a dark gray shirt. Beside him stood Enzo, the one with the scar, looking calm and alert. Behind them at a respectful distance was Sal. Malik's hand froze on the doorknob. "Who is it?" Ruth asked, her voice tight. "It's him, the girl's father." Ruth stood up quickly, smoothing down her dress, her face a mixture of fear and resignation. "Lord help us," she whispered. Malik opened the door. Marco's dark eyes met his, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then Marco nodded slightly. "Malik, good morning." "Good morning, Mr. Santoro." Marco's gaze shifted past Malik to Ruth, who stood in the middle of the small living room, her hands clasped in front of her, her chin lifted despite the fear in her eyes. "Mrs. Johnson, I presume," Marco said. "It's Miss, actually. Ruth Johnson." Marco inclined his head respectfully. "Miss Johnson, I apologize for the unannounced visit. May I come in?" It was phrased as a question, but they all knew it wasn't really. Ruth nodded, stepping aside. Marco entered, and the small apartment seemed to shrink around him. It wasn't that he was physically imposing, though he was tall. It was something else, something about the way he carried himself, the controlled power in his movements. Enzo and Sal remained in the hallway, Enzo pulling the door closed behind Marco, but not latching it. Marco's eyes moved around the room, taking in everything. The worn furniture, the water-stained ceiling, the space heater in the corner, because the building's heating system was broken more often than it worked. He didn't judge, didn't react. He just observed. "Please sit," Ruth said, gesturing to the couch. "Thank you." Marco sat, his movements deliberate and economical. He didn't lean back, didn't relax. He sat upright, hands resting on his knees, completely still. Malik and Ruth sat across from him, Malik on the arm of Ruth's chair, close enough to protect her if needed, though from what, he wasn't sure. Marco looked at Malik first, then at Ruth. "I'll come directly to the point. Yesterday, your grandson did something remarkable. He helped my daughter when no one else would. He put himself second and her first, without hesitation and without expecting anything in return." Ruth nodded slowly. "Malik's a good boy. I raised him to help people when he can." "You raised him well." Marco's voice carried genuine respect. "And now I'd like to do something for him in return." "We don't need charity, Mr. Santoro," Ruth said quietly but firmly. "I'm not offering charity." Marco's eyes were steady, unblinking. "I'm offering opportunity." The room was silent. Outside, a car alarm went off, distant and insistent. "What kind of opportunity?" Malik asked. Marco turned his attention fully to Malik. "My daughter needs a friend, someone she can trust, someone who won't see her as a burden or a responsibility, but as a person. Yesterday, you proved you could be that person." "I don't understand," Malik said carefully. "I'm inviting you to become part of our family," Marco said simply. "Not as staff, not as hired help, as family. You'd live with us, go to the same school as Laya, be her companion and friend. In return, I'll ensure your education is paid for, that you have everything you need, and," he glanced at Ruth, "that your grandmother receives the medical care she requires." The words hung in the air like smoke. Ruth's face went pale. "You want to take my grandson?" "No, Marco's voice was gentle but firm. "I want to give him a chance to become something more than this." He gestured around the small apartment, not unkindly, just factually. "You've given him a good foundation, Miss Johnson. You've raised him to be kind, to be strong, to care about others. But you can't give him the opportunities he deserves, I can." Tears welled up in Ruth's eyes. "He's all I have." "I know." Marco leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping lower. "And I'm not asking you to lose him. You'd see him regularly. He'd visit. He'd call. but he'd have a real future. College, career, a life beyond these walls. Malik's head was spinning. It felt surreal, like he'd stepped into someone else's life. Why would you do this? You don't even know me. Marco's eyes locked with his. Because yesterday, when it mattered, you did the right thing. And in my experience, that says more about a person than anything else could. But I'm nobody. You're somebody to my daughter. Marco's voice was absolute. And that makes you somebody to me. Ruth was crying now, silent tears running down her face. Malik reached over and took her hand. Grandma, you should go, Ruth whispered. This, this is your chance, baby. This is everything I couldn't give you. I can't leave you alone. You're not leaving me. She squeezed his hand hard, her swollen fingers gripping with surprising strength. You're going somewhere better, somewhere safe, somewhere with a future. Miss Johnson, Marco said quietly, I give you my word. Malik will be safe. He'll be cared for. And you'll receive a monthly stipend to ensure you're comfortable. Your medical expenses will be covered in full. Ruth looked up at him, searching his face. You swear it? On your daughter's life? Marco didn't hesitate. On my daughter's life. Ruth nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. She turned to Malik, cupping his face in her hands just like she had the night before. You're a good boy, Malik. The best thing that ever happened to me. But this is bigger than us. This is your chance to become the man you're meant to be. Grandma, I'll be fine, baby, I promise. You go. You take this chance, you make something of yourself, and you come visit your old grandmother and tell me all about it. Malik felt tears burning in his own eyes now. He pulled Ruth into a tight hug, feeling how small and fragile she was, how her bones pressed against his chest. I love you, Grandma. I love you too, baby, more than anything in this world. When they pulled apart, Marco was standing. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, thick with cash. He set it on the coffee table. For immediate expenses, he said to Ruth. The stipend will start next month. Ruth stared at the envelope, then at Marco. Why are you doing this? Really? Marco was silent for a moment, his expression distant. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, more human. Because 7 years ago, I lost my wife, cancer. Laya was 3, and in one moment everything changed. I understood, truly understood, that the only thing that matters in this world is family, taking care of the people you love, making sure they're safe. He looked at Malik. Your grandson saved my daughter. And more than that, he showed her that there are still good people in the world, people who will stop, who will help, who will care. That lesson is worth more to me than anything I could give him in return. Ruth nodded slowly, understanding passing between them, parent to parent, caretaker to caretaker. When? She asked. Today, if possible. I know it's sudden, but today, Ruth agreed, before I change my mind. The next hour passed in a blur. Malik packed his few belongings into a duffel bag, his clothes, his library books, a photo of his parents he kept in a frame by his bed. Ruth fussed over him, making sure he had everything, giving him advice he had heard 100 times before. You be respectful, you work hard, you remember where you came from. I will, Grandma, and you call me every day, every single day. I promised, and if anything goes wrong, if you need me, you come right home, you hear me? I hear you. When it was time to go, they stood by the door holding each other. Ruth was crying again, trying to be strong and failing. Malik held her tight, memorizing the feeling, the smell of her perfume, the way her hands trembled against his back. You're going to be okay, Grandma. I know, baby. You too. Marco waited patiently by the door, not rushing them, giving them the time they needed. When they finally pulled apart, he nodded to both of them. Ready? He asked Malik. Malik picked up his duffel bag and nodded, not trusting his voice. Marco opened the door. Enzo and Sal were still in the hallway, standing like statues. They fell into step behind Marco as he led Malik toward the stairs. At the landing, Malik turned back. Ruth stood in the doorway of the apartment, one hand gripping the frame, the other pressed to her mouth. I love you, he called. I love you too, baby. So much. Then they were descending the stairs, Marco's hand briefly touching Malik's shoulder in what might have been comfort, under guidance, or both. The Maserati was parked out front, gleaming black and impossibly expensive in the gray morning light. A few neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, watching with undisguised curiosity. Malik recognized Mr. Patterson from 2C and the Torres kids from across the hall. Sal opened the back door. Marco gestured for Malik to get in. "After you." Malik slid into the back seat, his duffel bag on his lap. Marco got in beside him. Enzo took the driver's seat, Sal the front passenger side. The doors closed with heavy, expensive thuds. As the car pulled away from the curb, Malik looked back through the rear window. Ruth was standing on the sidewalk now, wrapped in her thin cardigan, one hand raised in farewell. She looked small and alone against the gray building. Malik raised his hand, pressing his palm against the glass. Then they turned the corner, and she was gone. The drive took 40 minutes. They left Riverside behind, moving through the downtown core with its office towers and busy streets, then out past the suburbs into quieter, wealthier neighborhoods where the houses sat far back from the road behind iron gates and tall hedges. Marco didn't speak much during the drive. He made a few phone calls, speaking in rapid Italian, his voice low and controlled. Malik caught a few words but couldn't follow the meaning. He stared out the window, watching the world change around them, feeling like he was traveling between two different planets. They turned off the main road onto a private lane, narrow and tree-lined. The Maserati's tires crunched on gravel. After about a quarter mile, they reached a gate, tall iron bars with a security keypad. Enzo pressed a button, spoke a few words, and the gate swung open silently. Beyond it was the house. It wasn't a mansion in the gaudy sense, no columns or fountains or marble statues, but it was massive, a 3-story stone structure with dark wood shutters and a slate roof. Ivy climbed in one wall, old and established. The windows were tall and narrow, some with wrought iron balconies. The grounds were extensive, rolling lawns dotted with oak trees, a garden visible to one side. The Maserati pulled up to the front entrance and stopped. Sal got out first, opening Marco's door, then Malik's. Malik stepped out onto the circular driveway, gravel crunching beneath his sneakers, and just stared. "Come," Marco said. "I'll show you around." The front door was heavy wood, carved with intricate patterns. It opened before they reached it, pulled open by a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair pulled into a neat bun. She wore a simple black dress and sensible shoes. "Ah, Mr. Santoro, welcome home." "Teresa, this is Malik. He'll be staying with us." Teresa's eyes moved to Malik, assessing but not unkind. "Welcome, young man." "Thank you, ma'am." Inside, the house was exactly what Malik had imagined from the exterior. The entry hall had marble floors and dark wood paneling. A chandelier hung from the high ceiling, old crystal that caught the light and threw it in scattered patterns. Oil paintings lined the walls, landscapes and portraits of people Malik didn't recognize. The air smelled like beeswax and old wood, with an undertone of something else, cigar smoke maybe, or leather. Marco led him through the house, speaking as they walked. "Teresa manages the household. If you need anything, ask her. The kitchen is through there. Always open. Help yourself whenever you're hungry. Living room, dining room, library." He pushed open a door and Malik caught a glimpse of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather chairs, a fireplace with a low fire burning. They climbed a wide staircase to the second floor. The hallway was long, lined with more doors. Marco stopped at one near the middle and opened it. "This will be your room." Malik stepped inside and stopped. The room was bigger than the entire living room in his grandmother's apartment. A 4-poster bed dominated one side, made up with dark blue linens. There was a desk by the window, a bookshelf, a dresser, a door that led to what looked like a private bathroom. "This is too much," Malik said. "It's yours." Marco's tone left no room for argument. "Get settled. Unpack. Rest if you need to. Dinner is at 7. Teresa will show you to the dining room." "Where's Laya?" "With her tutor. She'll see you at dinner." Marco turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. "Malik?" "Yes, sir?" "This isn't charity, and it's not a gift. It's an opportunity. What you make of it is up to you. Understand?" Yes, sir. Marco nodded once and left, pulling the door closed behind him. Malik stood in the middle of the room, his duffel bag in his hand, and tried to process what had just happened. 24 hours ago, he'd been stocking shelves at Rivermart. Now he was standing in a mansion, in a room that belonged to him, with a closet bigger than his old bedroom. It didn't feel real. He dropped the duffel bag on the bed and walked to the window. It looked out over the back lawn where he could see more gardens, a stone path winding between flower beds, and in the distance, what looked like a greenhouse or gazebo. He stood there for a long time, just looking, trying to understand what his life had become. That evening, a knock came at his door. It was Teresa. "Dinner is ready, young man. Follow me." She led him back downstairs through a hallway he hadn't seen before, to a dining room with a long table that could have seated 20 people. Tonight it was set for 3, all at one end. Marco sat at the head, dressed now in a black shirt and slacks. To his right sat Laya. She looked up when Malik entered, and her face broke into a brilliant smile. "Malik." "Hey, Laya." She looked better than yesterday, clean and rested, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wore a simple blue dress. Her wheelchair was positioned at the table like any other chair. "Sit," Marco said, gesturing to the seat across from Laya. Malik sat. Almost immediately, Teresa appeared with plates, setting them down with practiced efficiency. The meal was simple but beautifully prepared. Roasted chicken, vegetables, bread still warm from the oven. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Laya spoke up. "Papa told me you're going to live with us now." Malik glanced at Marco, who nodded slightly. "Yeah, if that's okay with you." "It's more than okay, it's perfect." Laya's eyes were bright. "I've never had a brother before." The word hit Malik harder than he expected. Brother, not friend, not companion, brother. "I've never had a sister either," he said quietly. Marco watched them both, his expression unreadable, but Malik thought he saw approval in those dark eyes. After dinner, Marco invited Malik to his study. It was on the first floor, down a short hallway past the library. The room was smaller than Malik expected, more intimate. Dark wood paneling, a large desk, leather chairs, bookshelves filled with old volumes. A fire burned in a fireplace. The scent of cigar smoke hung in the air. Marco gestured to one of the chairs. Malik sat. Marco poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal decanter and handed one to Malik, then took the chair across from him. For a moment, he just looked at Malik, studying him in that intense, unblinking way he had. "You're wondering why I'm really doing this," Marco said. It wasn't a question. Malik nodded. Marco took a sip of water, then set the glass down on a side table. "When my wife died, I made myself a promise. I would protect Laya from everything. Give her everything. Make sure she never felt alone or afraid or helpless." He leaned back slightly, his fingers steepled in front of him. "But yesterday I failed. She was terrified and alone and I wasn't there. And the person I hired to protect her didn't care." His voice didn't rise, but the air seemed to grow colder. "You were there. You cared. You acted. And I realized something. I can't be everywhere. I can't protect her from everything. But I can surround her with people who will." He looked directly at Malik. "You're not here because I pity you. You're here because you proved yourself. Because you have something most people don't. Character, integrity, the willingness to do the right thing even when it costs you something." "I just helped her out of the mud," Malik said. "No," Marco's voice was firm. "You did more than that. You saw her as a person who mattered, not as an inconvenience, not as someone else's problem. You saw her." He stood, walked to the fireplace, and stared into the flames. "In my world, Malik, loyalty is everything. Family is everything. I'm offering you both. But understand, if you accept, it's not temporary. You're not a guest. You're family. And family means forever." Malik felt the weight of those words settle on his shoulders. "What if I mess up?" he asked quietly. Marco turned, his face lit by the firelight. "Then you learn. You grow, but you don't run. You don't quit. That's what family means." He walked back to his chair and sat down, leaning forward, his eyes locked on Malik's. "I'm giving you a choice. You can stay here, become part of this family, accept everything that comes with it. the good and the difficult. Or, he paused, I can drive you home right now, no hard feelings, no judgment. You walk away with my thanks and my respect. The room was silent except for the crackle of the fire. Malik thought about his grandmother, alone in that small apartment. He thought about going back to Rivermart, stocking shelves, worrying about rent and medications and bills. He thought about his future, or lack of one. Then he thought about Laya's smile at dinner, about Marco's steady presence, about this house with its quiet strength and its promise of something more. I want to stay, he said. Marco nodded slowly. Then welcome home, Malik. He stood and extended his hand. Malik stood and shook it, and this time the grip lasted longer. A seal, a promise. One more thing, Marco said as Malik turned to leave. Tomorrow we'll get you enrolled in school, new clothes, everything you need. But tonight, call your grandmother. Let her know you're safe. Yes, sir. And Malik? Malik turned back. You can call me Marco. Or if that feels strange, Mr. Santoro is fine. But you're not staff. You're family. Remember that. Malik nodded, his throat tight. Thank you, Marco. Marco. That night, lying in the massive bed in his new room, Malik called Ruth. She answered on the first ring. Baby, you okay? I'm okay, Grandma. Better than okay. He told her about the house, about Laya, about Marco's study and the dinner, and the promise of a new school. Ruth listened, asking questions, her voice thick with emotion. You sound happy, she said finally. I think I am, but I miss you. I miss you too, baby, but this is right. I can feel it. How are you feeling? You taking your meds? Don't you worry about me. I'm fine. You just focus on being the best you can be, you hear? I hear you. And Malik? Yeah, I'm so proud of you, so proud I could burst. Malik closed his eyes, feeling the tears come again. Love you, Grandma. Love you too, baby, always. When he hung up, he lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of this new place. Somewhere downstairs, a clock chimed. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. He fell asleep thinking about mud and rain and the moment he'd chosen to run instead of walk away. About how one choice, one moment, had changed everything. About family and what it really meant. And about the man downstairs in the study who'd seen something in him worth saving. The first few weeks were an adjustment. Malik woke up every morning in that massive bed and had to remind himself where he was. The house had rhythms and routines he had to learn. Breakfast at 7:30, Teresa laying out plates and fresh coffee in the kitchen. Marco reading the newspaper in silence, occasionally making notes in the margins. Loya, bright and talkative, filling the quiet spaces with stories about her tutoring lessons or questions about Malik's plans for the day. School was different too. Marco enrolled him at Westfield Academy, a private school on the north side of the city. It was the same school Leia attended when she felt well enough. The building was all glass and modern architecture, nothing like the crowded public school Malik had come from. The students wore uniforms, spoke in quiet voices, carried laptops instead of battered textbooks. On his first day, Marco drove him personally. The Maserati pulled up to the front entrance, and Malik felt every eye in the parking lot turned toward them. You'll be fine, Marco said, his voice calm. Just be yourself. What if they ask questions about who I am, where I came from? Marco looked at him steadily. Then you tell them the truth. You're Malik Johnson. You live with the Santoro family. Beyond that, it's none of their business. What if they ask about you? A slight smile touched Marco's lips. They won't. Most people here know better. Malik didn't understand what that meant, but he nodded anyway. The first week was rough. The coursework was more advanced than what he was used to. The other students were polite but distant, sizing him up, trying to figure out where he fit in the social hierarchy. A few tried to befriend him, probably because they'd seen Marco drop him off. Others avoided him altogether. But Malik kept his head down and worked. He stayed late in the library, catching up on reading. He asked questions in class. He watched and learned. By the second week, he started to find his rhythm. At home, life settled into patterns. Malik spent time with Aliyah almost every day. They'd sit in the library doing homework together, or out in the gardens when the weather was nice. Leia loved to draw, filling sketchbooks with detailed pencil portraits and landscapes. Malik would read while she worked, comfortable silence between them. Sometimes they talked about serious things, about her mother, who Leia remembered in fragments and feelings more than concrete memories, about Malik's parents, killed in a car accident when he was 7, about the accident that had put Leia in the wheelchair when she was 5, a drunk driver running a red light. "Do you ever get angry?" Malik asked one afternoon. They were in the greenhouse surrounded by flowering plants. Leia was sketching a rose. "About the wheelchair? Sometimes. Mostly I'm just tired of it, of people seeing the chair before they see me. I don't see the chair." She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. "I know, that's why Papa brought you here." "What do you mean?" "You saw me stuck in the mud, and you didn't see a helpless girl in a wheelchair. You just saw someone who needed help, someone who mattered." She returned to her sketch, her pencil moving in quick, confident strokes. "That's rare, Malik. Rarer than you think." Marco remained a mystery in many ways. He was present, but not intrusive. He had dinner with them most nights, asking about their days, offering quiet advice. But he also disappeared sometimes, gone for hours or full days, Enzo and Sal always with him. He'd return late at night. Malik would hear the car in the driveway, the low murmur of voices in the hallway below. Malik never asked where he went. Something about Marco's demeanor suggested those questions weren't welcome. But he learned things anyway, just by observing. He learned that people treated Marco with a particular kind of respect that bordered on fear. Delivery drivers wouldn't meet his eyes. Service workers hurried to complete their tasks when he was around. Even Teresa, who'd worked for the family for years, spoke carefully in his presence. He learned that Marco conducted business from his study, men in dark suits arriving at odd hours, speaking in low voices behind closed doors. Sometimes Malik would pass by and hear fragments of conversation, always in Italian, always serious. He learned that Marco valued silence and control, that he never raised his voice but didn't need to, that his word was absolute. And he learned slowly that despite all of this, or perhaps because of it, Marco was a good father, patient with Leia, protective without being suffocating, proud of her accomplishments. And increasingly, he extended that same care to Malik. It showed in small ways, making sure Malik had everything he needed for school, checking on his grades, sitting with him in the study sometimes in the evening, just the two of them, talking about life, about choices, about being a man. "Strength isn't about muscles or fighting," Marco said one night. They were by the fireplace, the room warm and dim. "It's about knowing who you are and not compromising that for anyone." "Even when it's hard?" Malik asked. "Especially when it's hard." Marco poured himself a small glass of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the firelight. He didn't offer Malik any, didn't pretend he was older than he was. "You made a hard choice when you stopped to help Leia. It would have been easier to keep walking. Safer, less complicated, but you didn't." "I just did what felt right." "Exactly." Marco took a sip, his eyes on the flames. Most people ignore that feeling. They talk themselves out of it. They find excuses. But that feeling, that instinct to do right, even when it costs you something, that's character. And character is everything. He looked at Malik then, his gaze direct and serious. "I'm teaching you how the world really works, Malik. Not the fairy tale versions they sell in schools. The real version. And the most important lesson is this. Be someone people can count on. Be someone who keeps their word. Because at the end of the day, that's all you really have. Your word and your honor." Malik absorbed this, turning it over in his mind. "Is that how you built all this? Your word and honor?" Marco's expression shifted, something flickering in his eyes. Not anger, but acknowledgement. "Yes, and by understanding that loyalty is a two-way street, you take care of the people who take care of you. You protect what's yours, and you never, ever betray the people who trust you." He finished his whiskey and set the glass down. "Remember that, Malik, no matter where life takes you." 3 months in, Malik had his first real crisis. It was a Friday afternoon, and he was walking through the hallway at Westfield when he overheard a conversation. 3 boys from his grade, standing by the lockers, talking loudly enough that Malik caught every word. Yeah, my dad says Santoro's connected. Like, seriously connected. Connected to what? You know, the families, organized crime. No way, he's just a businessman. Then why does everyone act scared of him? My uncle saw him at a restaurant once and the owner literally cleared out a whole section for him. Didn't even ask for money, just did it. Malik's stomach dropped. He kept walking, his face neutral, but his mind was racing. Connected. Organized crime. The families. Suddenly, things clicked into place. The way people treated Marco, the late-night meetings, Enzo and Sal, who weren't just drivers, but something more. The careful way Marco spoke, never saying more than necessary. Malik went home that afternoon in a daze. At dinner, he was quiet, pushing food around his plate. Laya noticed. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just tired." Marco's eyes were on him, observant and knowing. After dinner, he caught Malik in the hallway. "My study, now." It wasn't a question. Malik followed him, his heart pounding. Marco closed the door behind them and gestured to a chair. Malik sat. Marco remained standing, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "You heard something today," Marco said. It wasn't a question. Malik nodded. "What did you hear?" "That you're connected to organized crime." Marco was silent for a long moment. Then he walked to the window, looking out at the darkening lawn. "Do you know what that means? Connected?" "I think so." "Tell me." Malik swallowed. "It means you're part of something, something outside the law, that people are afraid of you because you have power they don't understand." Marco turned, leaning against the window frame. Close enough. He walked to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a cigar. He didn't light it, just rolled it between his fingers. "I'm going to tell you something, Malik, because you're smart enough to have figured it out anyway, and because you deserve the truth. Yes, I'm connected. I'm part of a world most people don't see, don't understand, and frankly, don't want to know about." Malik's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. "I run businesses, some of them legitimate, some of them less so. I make deals. I solve problems. I protect people who are under my protection. And sometimes I do things that aren't legal." He looked directly at Malik. "Does that scare you?" Malik thought about it, really thought about it. He should be terrified. He should be running. But instead, he thought about Marco sitting with Laya at dinner, making her laugh, about the way he'd treated Ruth with respect, about the opportunities he'd given Malik, the way he'd kept every promise. "No," Malik said quietly. "It doesn't." Marco's eyebrows rose slightly. "Why not?" "Because you've been nothing but good to me, and to Laya, and to my grandmother. Whatever else you do, that's what I know about you." Marco studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "You're wiser than your years, Malik. Most people can't separate the man from the mythology. But you can." He walked back to his chair and sat down, setting the cigar on the desk. "I won't lie to you. My world is dangerous. There are people who would hurt me if they could, who would hurt anyone connected to me. That's why Enzo and Sal, are always close. That's why this house has security you don't see. That's why I'm careful about who I trust." He leaned forward. "But here's what you need to understand. I brought you into this family because I believe in you, because I saw something in you worth protecting and nurturing, and I will protect you, Malik. You and Laya both. With everything I have." "What if someone comes after us?" Malik asked. "Because of you? They won't. I'm careful. I keep my family separate from my business. But if anyone ever did try," Marco's voice went cold, "they wouldn't survive the attempt." It should have sounded like a threat or like bravado, but it didn't. It sounded like a simple fact. "I'm not asking you to be part of my business, Malik. I'm offering you a different path, education, legitimate opportunities, a clean future. But I need you to understand what family means in my world. It means loyalty above all. It means you never betray the people who trust you. It means you protect what's yours." "I understand," Malik said. "Do you? Because once you're in, Shaitan. There's no halfway. You're either family or you're not." Malik thought about the alternative. Going back to Riverside, to poverty and struggle and limited horizons. He thought about Ruth, who was now receiving regular medical care and didn't have to choose between food and medication anymore. He thought about Laya, who'd become the sister he never had. "I'm in," he said firmly, "all the way." Marco held his gaze, searching for doubt, for hesitation. Finding none, he nodded. "Then we never speak of this again. You go to school, you study, you build your life, and you remember that you're a Centauro now, in everything but name, and that means something." He stood, extending his hand. Malik stood and shook it. "Welcome to the family, Malik. Truly." That night, Malik lay in bed thinking about what he'd learned. He should feel conflicted, maybe even guilty. But he didn't. He felt strangely relieved. The mystery was solved. The pieces fit together. And more than that, he understood now why Marco had chosen him. It wasn't just because he'd helped Laya. It was because he'd shown he could be trusted, that he could see past surface judgments to what really mattered. Character, loyalty, honor. In Marco's world, those weren't just words. They were currency, and Malik had proven he had them. He fell asleep that night, feeling for the first time since arriving like he truly belonged. Time moved differently in the Santoro household. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months. Malik's life at Westfield improved steadily. His grades climbed from catching up to excelling. He joined the debate team, discovering he had a talent for argument and persuasion. Teachers praised his work ethic. A few students, genuine ones who didn't care about his connection to Marco, became real friends. His relationship with Laya deepened into something profound. They weren't just housemates or even friends. They were siblings in the truest sense, bonded not by blood, but by choice and circumstance and genuine affection. Laya was brilliant. Malik learned this gradually. Her tutors weren't just teaching her the standard curriculum, they were pushing her into advanced mathematics, literature, art theory. She absorbed everything, her mind sharp and hungry for knowledge. Her drawings evolved from simple sketches to sophisticated portraits that captured not just likeness, but soul. She was also stubborn. When doctors suggested a new experimental treatment for her condition, Leia researched it herself, reading medical journals Malik couldn't hope to understand, asking questions that made the specialists pause and reconsider their assumptions. She agreed to the treatment not because someone told her to, but because she decided it was worth the risk. "You're kind of amazing, you know that," Malik said one afternoon. They were in the library, Leia working on a portrait, Malik supposedly reading but mostly just watching her work. "I'm really not," she said without looking up. "Yeah, you are. You're smarter than half my teachers." "Intelligence isn't the same as wisdom," she added, shading to the portrait's cheekbone. "Smart people make stupid decisions all the time." "Like what?" "Like thinking the wheelchair defines me. That's stupid. I'm not my disability any more than you're your circumstances." She looked up then, meeting his eyes. "We're both more than where we came from, Malik. That's the point." It was during one of these afternoon sessions that Laya first brought up the idea that would change everything. "I want to design something," she said suddenly. Malik looked up from his book. "Design what?" "A better wheelchair. One that works on any terrain. Sand, mud, snow, hiking trails. Something that doesn't trap you the way mine trapped me in the park." She set down her pencil, her expression intense. "I've been researching. There are wheelchairs designed for specific terrains, but nothing that's truly all-purpose. Nothing that gives real freedom. I want to change that." Malik closed his book. "That's actually brilliant." "You think so?" "Yeah, I do. How would you even start something like that?" "I don't know. That's the problem." She frowned. "I can conceptualize it, sketch the design, but I don't have the engineering knowledge to actually build it. And I'm just a kid. Who's going to take me seriously?" Malik thought for a moment. "What if it wasn't just you? What if we did it together?" Leia's eyes widened. "You'd do that?" "Why not? You're right. It's a good idea, an important one. And maybe between your design skills and I don't know, my ability to research and problem solve, we could figure it out." A smile spread across Leia's face, the kind of radiant, transformative smile that made everything around her seem brighter. "Okay, yes, Let's do it. They told Marco about the idea that evening at dinner. He listened carefully, asking questions, probing the concept. When they finished explaining, he was quiet for a moment, his fork resting on his plate. "This is serious?" he asked. "Not just a phase?" "It's serious," Leia said firmly. Marco nodded slowly. "Then you'll need resources, a workspace, materials, possibly consultants." "We can't afford," Malik started. Marco held up a hand. "The greenhouse isn't being used. You can convert it into a workshop. I'll hire an engineer to consult. Someone good, and I'll provide a budget for materials and prototyping." Leia stared at him. "Really? You do that?" "Of course," Marco's voice was matter-of-fact. "You're serious about this. I support serious endeavors. But understand, I'm not doing this for you. I'm giving you the tools. What you build with them is entirely up to you both." He looked between them. "And if you fail, you fail. That's part of learning. But you work hard, you commit fully, and you see it through. No half measures. Agreed?" "Agreed," they said in unison. 2 weeks later, the greenhouse had been transformed. Benches lined the walls, covered with tools and materials. A drafting table sat in one corner, already covered with Leia's sketches. Marco's engineer consultant, a woman named Dr. Helen Reeves, who specialized in mobility devices, came twice a week to review their progress and offer guidance. The project consumed them. After school, after homework, they'd head to the workshop and lose themselves in design iterations and prototypes. They failed constantly. Wheels that worked beautifully on hardwood floors seized up in mud. Frames that were light enough to maneuver lacked the structural integrity for rough terrain. Mechanisms broke. Designs proved impractical. Materials failed stress tests. But they kept going. Malik discovered he loved the process of engineering, the way problems had to be broken down into smaller pieces, solved methodically, rebuilt into solutions. He checked out books on mechanical engineering, watched online lectures, taught himself CAD software. Leia's sketches evolved into detailed technical drawings. She had an instinct for design, for understanding how things should fit together, how form and function could merge. Dr. Reeves watched their progress with increasing respect. "You two are onto something," she said one evening, examining their latest prototype. "This wheel design, the way it adjusts to different terrains automatically, I haven't seen anything quite like it." "It still needs work," Leia said. "Of course it does, but the concept is sound. And more importantly, you're thinking about the user experience in ways that professional designers often miss. Because you're not just designing for users, you are a user." She looked at Leia with professional admiration. That perspective is invaluable. 6 months into the project, they had a working prototype. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. Malik and Leia took it to Brookdale Park, back to the spot where everything had started. They'd chosen a rainy day deliberately, waiting until the paths were muddy and challenging. Leia maneuvered the prototype through terrain that would have trapped her old wheelchair in seconds. The wheels adjusted, gripped, powered through. When they reached the exact spot where she'd been stuck before, she stopped. "Well?" Malik asked. Leia looked down at the mud, then at him. Tears were running down her face, but she was smiling. "It works. It actually works." They sat there for a long time in the rain, both of them soaked and filthy and absolutely elated. That evening, they presented the prototype to Marco. He examined it carefully, testing the mechanisms, asking detailed questions. When he finished, he set it down and looked at them both. "This is remarkable. You should be proud." "We want to do more," Leia said. "We want to refine it, test it properly, maybe even patent the design." "And then?" Marco asked. "I don't know, maybe start a company, help other people who need better mobility devices?" Marco nodded slowly. "That's a worthy goal, but it's a long road. Years of development, testing, regulatory approval, funding. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes," they said together. Marco smiled, a rare expression that softened his usually controlled features. "Then I'll support you, however I can." He stood and walked to where Leia sat in the prototype chair. He rested his hand on her shoulder. "Your mother would be very proud of you. Both of you." It was the highest praise Malik had ever heard him give. That night, Malik called Ruth to tell her about the prototype. She listened, asking questions, her voice full of pride and wonder. You're building something real, baby. Something that matters. I'm so proud I could burst. We couldn't have done it without Marco's support. He's a good man, Ruth said quietly. I wasn't sure at first, but he's been good to you. Good to both of us. How are you feeling, Grandma? Really? Better than I have in years. The doctors say my numbers are good. I'm taking my walks every day. I even joined a church group. Malik smiled. That's great. You sound happy, baby, really happy. That means everything to me. I am happy. This is a good life. Then that's all that matters. They talked for another half hour, Ruth telling stories about her week, Malik describing school and the workshop, and his growing friendship with Dr. Reeves. When they hung up, Malik felt the familiar pang of missing her, but it was softer now, tempered by the knowledge that she was okay, that she was thriving. He went to sleep that night thinking about mud and rain and the strange path that had brought him here, about family and how it could be built from unexpected pieces, about a man who showed love through actions rather than words, and a girl who'd become his sister in every way that mattered, about how sometimes getting dirty changes everything. 7 years passed. Malik graduated from Westfield Academy at the top of his class, delivering the valedictorian speech to a packed auditorium. Marco sat in the front row beside Laya, who was 20 now and radiant with pride. Ruth was there too, brought in from Riverside in a car Marco had sent, her health much improved from the regular medical care. Malik spoke about choices, about the moments that define us, about the importance of seeing people truly and acting on what you see. He didn't mention the mud specifically, but everyone who knew the story understood what he was really talking about. After the ceremony, Marco pulled him aside. Proud of you, son. It was the first time he'd used that word. Son. Malik felt it settle into his chest, warm and solid. Thank you. For everything. Marco gripped his shoulder firmly. You earned it. Every bit of it. Now go make something of yourself. Malik went to college. Marco had offered to send him anywhere, any school in the country, all expenses paid. But Malik chose the State University, a good school with an excellent biomedical engineering program, close enough to visit home regularly. Home. He realized he thought of the Santoro house as home now, not Riverside. That shift had happened gradually, imperceptibly, until one day it was simply true. At university, Malik thrived. He joined research labs, worked on mobility device projects, published papers. He came home most weekends, spending time with Laya in the workshop. Their wheelchair design had evolved significantly. They'd brought on additional consultants, filed patents, started a small company called Wheel Beyond. Dr. Reeves had become more than a consultant. She'd become a partner, handling the business side while Malik and Laya focused on research and development. They had funding now, investors who believed in the vision. They had a prototype being tested at rehabilitation centers in 3 states. They had something real. Laya was attending university too, studying industrial design remotely, her coursework integrated with her work on Wheel Beyond. She'd grown into a remarkable young woman, confident and articulate, her disability an aspect of her identity, but not its definition. Marco remained the steady constant in their lives. He attended every major milestone, every presentation, every test demonstration. He offered advice when asked, but never imposed. He watched them build something from nothing, and Malik could see the pride in his eyes, carefully controlled, but unmistakable. Ruth visited regularly. Marco had arranged for a car service to bring her whenever she wanted. She'd become close with Teresa, the 2 women sitting in the kitchen drinking tea and talking for hours. Her health had stabilized, the regular medical care and reduced stress giving her a quality of life she hadn't had in years. Sometimes when Malik was home, he'd sit with Marco in the study like they'd done years before. The conversations were different now, between equals rather than mentor and student. They talked about business, about ethics, about the choices that define a life. Do you ever regret it? Malik asked one evening. They were by the fireplace, the familiar ritual of after-dinner conversation. Your life, the choices you made. Marco was quiet for a long moment, swirling whiskey in his glass. Regret is complicated. I've done things I'm not proud of. Things I had to do, or believed I had to do, to protect what was mine. But those same choices gave me the resources to help people like you, like your grandmother, like my daughter. He looked at the fire. If I could go back and choose differently, would my life be better? Maybe. Or maybe I'd be dead and Leia would be alone. You can't separate the good from the bad and pretend they're not connected. He turned to Malik. What I don't regret is bringing you into this family. That was one of the best decisions I ever made. Even though I'm not blood, especially because you're not blood. Marco's voice was firm. You chose to be here. You chose to be loyal, to work hard, to be the man you are. Blood is an accident of birth. Character is earned, and your character is worth more than any genetic connection could be. In his final year of college, Malik received multiple job offers from major medical device companies. The offers were generous, prestigious positions that would have set him up for a comfortable career. He turned them all down. I'm staying with Wheel Beyond, he told Laya. They were in the workshop, now a proper office space in a renovated building downtown. We're on to something real. I want to see it through. Leia smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. DeReeves clapped him on the shoulder. Smart decision. We're about to close our Series A funding. This is going to get serious, fast. She was right. Within 6 months, Wheel Beyond had secured significant investment. They hired a full team, expanded their testing, began working with international partners. Their all-terrain wheelchair was being used by people in 37 countries. Awards followed, patents, recognition from the industry. But more important than any of that were the letters. People writing to thank them, to share stories about how the wheelchair had changed their lives. A veteran who could now go hiking with his family, a child who could play on the beach, an elderly woman who could navigate her garden again. Those letters, Malik and Laya kept every one. On a warm spring evening, Malik stood at the podium at his college graduation, preparing to deliver the commencement speech. He'd been chosen by vote of his peers, an honor he still couldn't quite believe. He gripped the edges of the wooden stand and took a breath. When I was 15 years old, he began, I made a choice that changed my life. I was walking home from work, exhausted, soaking wet, just wanting to get out of the rain. And then I saw a little girl stuck in the mud, crying for help while people walked past like she was invisible. He paused, finding Leia in the third row. She sat in their latest wheelchair design, the one that had won international recognition. Beside her sat Marco, looking older now, but still solid, still present. Ruth was there too, thinner than she'd been, moving slower, but alive, defying every doctor's prediction with sheer stubbornness and love. I almost kept walking too, Malik continued. For about half a second, I thought about how wet I'd get, how my shoes would be ruined, how I was already late. But then I looked at her face, this terrified kid who just needed someone to see her. His voice caught slightly, and I realized something. The cost of walking away was higher than the cost of getting wet. The audience was silent, listening. So I ran toward her instead of away. I stepped into the mud. I picked her up. I got soaked. And in that moment, I thought I was saving her. He looked directly at Leia. But the truth is, she saved me. That girl, my sister Leia, she and her father gave me a family, an education, a future. They taught me that accepting help isn't weakness, it's connection. That family isn't always blood. It's who shows up, who stays, who chooses you. Leia was crying now, not bothering to hide it. Ruth dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Marco sat with his hand resting on the back of Laya's wheelchair, his expression controlled, but his eyes bright. Together, Laya and I built something called Wheel Beyond, Malik continued, an all-terrain wheelchair that's now being used by people in 37 countries. We've won awards, secured patents, started a nonprofit, but none of that matters as much as what we learned building it. That obstacles aren't endings. They're just opportunities to create something better. He gripped the podium tighter. I'm graduating today with a degree in biomedical engineering. I have the opportunity to work with a company I helped create, doing work that matters. I have a family who loves me. I have a future that 7 years ago I couldn't have even imagined. His voice strengthened. And it all started because I made one choice, to help someone who needed it without asking what I'd get in return. Malik looked out at the sea of graduating students, their faces young and hopeful. So to everyone graduating today, I'll say this. When you see someone stuck in the mud, literally or figuratively, don't walk past, don't calculate the cost. Don't wait for someone else to help. Just run. Run toward them. Get wet, get dirty, show up. His voice dropped lower, more intense. Because that single choice, that moment of deciding someone else matters more than your comfort, that's what changes everything. The applause started before he finished speaking, building into a standing ovation that filled the hall. Malik stepped back from the podium, overwhelmed, his eyes burning with tears he refused to shed in front of thousands of people. As he descended the stage, Leia was already wheeling toward him. She grabbed his hand as he reached her, pulling him down into a fierce hug. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "So proud." Marco embraced them both, and Ruth reached up to cup Malik's face in her trembling hands. "Your parents would be so proud, baby," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And so am I." They stood there, the four of them, a family forged not by blood but by choice, by mud and rain, by one boy's decision to run toward instead of away. 2 weeks after graduation, Malik and Leia returned to Brookdale Park for the first time since that rainy afternoon 7 years ago. The park had been renovated, new pathways, better drainage, accessibility ramps everywhere. The city had finally invested in making the space truly inclusive. But they went to the old spot anyway, the place where Leia had been stuck, where everything had changed. It looked different now, smaller somehow, just a patch of ground like any other, the mud long since dried and covered with fresh gravel and careful landscaping. But as they sat there, Leia in her chair, Malik on the stone bench beside her, it all felt immediate again. The fear, the desperation, the choice to run. "Hard to believe it's been 7 years, Leia said softly. "Feels like yesterday, and also like a lifetime ago." "Both, I think." They sat in comfortable silence, watching people move through the park, families with children, joggers, dog walkers. So much life, continuing its patterns, unaware of what this spot meant to two people who'd built a world from a moment of kindness. Then, a commotion near the playground. A group of teenagers had surrounded a homeless man sitting on a bench. They were laughing, jeering, making cruel comments about his clothes, his smell, the shopping cart full of his belongings parked beside him. The man sat with his head down, saying nothing, enduring. Malik felt the old anger rise, sharp and immediate. Beside him, Leia's hands clenched on her armrests. Without a word, she wheeled toward them. Malik followed. "Hey," Leia said sharply as she approached. Her voice cut through the laughter like a blade. The teenagers turned, surprised. There were four of them, probably 16 or 17, dressed in expensive athletic wear. "Leave him alone," Leia said, her tone brooking no argument. One of the boys, tall with styled hair, smirked. "Why? He's not bothering anyone. We're just having fun." "No." Leia wheeled closer, positioning herself between the teenagers and the homeless man. "You're being cruel, and it stops now." The boy's smirk faltered. "Who are you to tell us what to do?" "Someone who knows what it's like to be ignored when you need help." Leia's voice was steady, strong. "Years ago, I was stuck in the mud right over there, scared, crying, calling for help. And people like you walked right past me. They saw me and they chose to look away." Her eyes moved to each teenager in turn. "But one person stopped. One person saw me, really saw me, and decided I mattered. That I was worth helping, even though there was nothing in it for him." She gestured toward the homeless man, who had lifted his head slightly, watching her with weary, disbelieving eyes. "This man is stuck too. Maybe not in mud, but in circumstances you don't understand and haven't bothered to try to understand. And today I see him. He matters. He's worth standing up for." The teenagers shifted uncomfortably. One girl looked genuinely ashamed. Another boy muttered something under his breath and turned away. "Come on," the tall one said, his bravado deflating. "This is stupid anyway." They dispersed, heading toward the parking lot, their laughter hollow now, forced. Laya watched them go, then turned to the homeless man. "I'm sorry about them," she said gently. The man looked at her with something like wonder. "You didn't have to do that, miss, but thank you." "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." Leia reached into her bag and pulled out a business card along with some cash. "There's a warm meal and a bed here if you need it. No questions asked. And if you need help beyond that, call this number. We have resources." The man took the card with shaking hands, tears welling in his eyes. "God bless you, young lady. God bless you." "God bless you too, sir." As they wheeled away, Malik looked at his sister with profound respect. "That was incredible." "I learned from the best," Leia said simply, taking his hand. They returned to the stone bench where Malik had first set her down 7 years ago. They sat together watching the park come alive with late afternoon activity, families laughing, children playing, people living their lives, unaware of the small drama that had just unfolded. A light rain began to fall, just a drizzle, gentle and clean. Neither of them moved to leave. "You know what's funny?" Leia said softly. "That day when I was stuck, I thought my life was over, that everything good was behind me. And, but it wasn't ending." She turned to look at him, her eyes bright. "It was beginning." Malik squeezed her hand. "Same." They sat there as the rain fell, two people who had been broken and remade, who'd found family in the most unexpected place, who'd learned that sometimes the deepest connections come not from shared blood, but from shared mud, from being willing to get dirty to help someone else. The rain fell softly, like a blessing. And somewhere in the park, someone helped someone else over a puddle, a small kindness, an echo of a larger truth, that we save ourselves by saving others. That family is who we choose, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is run towards someone in the rain. Laya and Malik sat together, hands linked, watching the world go by. The circle had closed, the story was complete, and the mud that had once trapped them had become the foundation on which they'd built everything that mattered. "Ready to go home?" Malik asked. Leia smiled, that brilliant, transformative smile that lit up everything around her. "Yeah, let's go home." Together they left the park where their story began, carrying with them the most important lesson of all, that sometimes getting a little wet changes everything.